Welcome back to the ReZero Power System explanation videos. Last time we touched on Ode, Mana, Gates, Magic, and Curses. This time we'll be talking about some fan-favorite aspects of the power system, that is, Divine Protections, Authorities, and the man himself. However, for the sake of transparency and accuracy, so you guys know how good I'm doing in these videos, we'll dip back into the first video just for a second to go over a couple of things that need to be corrected or amended. Don't worry, this won't take long. First things first, while talking about Sacrament of the Immortal King, I mentioned that it could be used with some kind of earth magic, but that was a misunderstanding of something in Arc 8. It is simply a forbidden art that takes water magic to the extreme. Second, when talking about curses, I mentioned the Binding of Thorns. This was not an inaccurate name. However, we have new information, and we can now refer to it as the Soul Marriage Curse. Finally, when discussing the witches' auras, we discussed how their auras alone would make people rip their own faces apart. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding based on a very inaccurate translation of a side story. This still happened, but it wasn't their aura related to the flow method or anything like that, it was their miasma, something I probably should have touched on in the previous video, so let's do it now. Miasma is mana, however, it's become contaminated after being discharged by people closely related to witches. The witches themselves, the Sin Archbishops, and witch beasts. This miasma floats throughout the air, and coming into contact with it is generally harmless and can't usually be detected, though some people are capable of doing so. Miasma really becomes an issue in larger quantities, where it enters your gate and begins to drive you to madness, and that's when you get the earlier explanation about witches causing people around them to claw at their own faces. As just mentioned, this miasma is linked to people closely related to witches, and what better way to segue than to bring up something closely related to them? Authorities. These are powers that are described as having the right, or the authority, to interfere with the world. Authorities are something that spawn from witch factors, also being described as the antithesis of Ode Laguna. Not just everyone can have one of these, however, as compatibility plays a big role in the effectiveness of an authority. Petaljuice is a notable example of someone who was not compatible with his witch factor, and I think his degradation is clear as day. Also with Petaljuice, we see another aspect of these witch factors, primarily that they can be split and shared, despite Tape's author statement that says otherwise. All witch factors can be split into shared portions that can be given to people to turn them into apostles of the main witch factor holder, like Petaljuice's fingers in Arc 3. Gluttony, uniquely, can be split in a way that 3 people hold the Gluttony witch factor, hence why there are 3 Sin Archbishops of Gluttony, and notably, along with compatibility, authorities manifest differently per person as well. Let's take Sloth as our first example. Our first wielder of Sloth, Sekhmet, used an invisible force to smack and crush things. It was powerful enough that she was able to use it to hold her own against the divine dragon Volcanica. Petaljuice's version was pretty clearly different, summoning multiple completely undetectable hands and being able to control them. They were pretty strong and able to phase through objects, but probably not as powerful as Sekhmet's version. Subaru's, or Invisible Providence, is a much more reeled-in version of Petaljuice's, summoning only a single hand that is significantly weaker. But what's most different about Subaru's usage is its implementation of it being a tool to save rather than hurt. Now, before we get into Greed's authorities, I'm going to warn you now that there will be some decent spoilers for Season 3 content and beyond past this point. Nothing that will severely ruin your experience, but still something to note. Echidna's version was known in the web novel as The Memories of the World. Note that anything mentioned being from the web novel in these videos is subject to change, as the web novel is not the final version of the story, but not many specifics are known about Echidna's authority, besides the fact that the Tomes of Wisdom are a product of her authority, and that they chronicle everything about the world, past, present, and future. Regulus's version was wildly different from Echidna's version, its first function being known as Lion's Heart, which made it so Regulus could stop the flow of time for his own body and other objects. If stopped on himself, his heartbeat would stop, as would his own natural bodily functions, additionally freeing himself and objects with his authority from the natural laws of physics, causing devastating attacks as they would not be slowed down by things like wind resistance and obviously things of that nature. The second aspect of his authority was known as Little King, allowing himself to share a heart that could be used as his own to anybody he considered one of his subjects. Doing so effectively negated the first aspect of his authority's downside, otherwise known as stopping his own heart. As long as Little King was active, Regulus was essentially untouchable while using Lion's Heart. If you think Regulus's version is different from Echidna's, well, Subaru's is even more different. Corleonis worked in the opposite direction of Regulus's authority, allowing Subaru to take on the burdens of other people. It however only works if he has a personal connection with them, otherwise they will not appear on what essentially amounts as his radar when using it. Just like Regulus's, Subaru's authority also had a second aspect known as Second Shift, or known as Division of Labor, which allowed him to move the burden he is taking to other people, but only if they consent to take it, being able to spread out pain and suffering to others with their consent. Gluttony's authorities are quite far-reaching, with Daphne, the Witch of Gluttony, having a few powers. Specifics of all of her powers aren't known, however she was capable of creating witch beasts, and it's also implied that the Sin Archbishops have the same capabilities. In the web novel, seeing Daphne's left eye made Subaru feel an insatiable famine, which caused him to eat his own arm. In an art book, however, this was flipped to her right eye, with her left eye being dubbed aphasia, or a refusal to take food. A general function of gluttony authorities we've seen is that they are able to touch a target and lick that hand to activate their authority. If they're eating a name, they must also know the target's name and say it out loud. If consuming an incorrect or fake name, there are severe drawbacks. When the user eats a name, this erases all memories of that target's existence, even from spirits. When memories are eaten, which we're not sure how that happens yet, it effectively causes you to reset as a person, but not completely. You still retain basic functions like understanding language and having enough memories to function, just not about your own personal life details, and this is what Krush is suffering from at the start of Season 2. Now, when both your name and memories are eaten, you enter a completely empty state of being, your body seemingly suspended in time, but not exactly, able to be remembered by nobody and being helpless, such as what happened to Rem. Gluttonies also have a couple of extra features. Yes, they are not done. Lunar Eclipse is an ability that allows the authority wielder to use their victim's memories and skills, while still being limited to their own body. The main benefit compared to its counterpart is being able to combine techniques and skills together to create powerful combos. The other half, Solar Eclipse, allows the user to use the victim's name to instead transform their appearance into theirs and use their abilities to the fullest. However, it is possible and very easy to lose yourself while using this ability. Leibot and Kaitos used a unique ability that the fandom has dubbed Warlock Form, that turned him into a strange amalgamation of different names and memories, becoming extraordinarily powerful. Gluttony, when wielded by Spica, her authority being known as Star Eating, which we have absolutely zero idea how it works, but we have witnessed it severing the connections of the undead in Arc 8, which fully killed them. The Witch of Wrath, Minerva, used her authority to heal people by striking them. However, this connected her to Ode Laguna, taking the mana from a random place and causing a natural disaster, effectively equalizing out the damage that she undoes. Sirius's version is known as Soul Washing. She can share the very essence of emotion, causing a feedback loop amongst people, and it also allows her to share pain and death. There is also something about her singing, having learned from Liliana in Arc 5, known as the Song of Resentment, though its effects are largely unknown, and we're not even sure what it has to do with wrath or any of the specific details of it. The Witch of Lust, Carmilla, used the authority known as Faceless Bride. Her ability would captivate people, causing them to lose all sense of awareness, to the point where they don't notice injuries inflicted upon them and forget to breathe, and can even make their hearts stop beating. She can also use this to make other people see and hear her as they want to see and hear. Do note that even though Carmilla's authority can basically break you, it's not always a given, as she used it to amass a powerful army of powerful guards, including the Great Spirit Muspel. Capella works a little bit differently. It's known as Transmutation and Transfiguration. She can transform herself as well as others into things, allowing her to heal or to completely destroy someone's being, like how she affected the entire city of Pristella at the end of Arc 5. Now, we're really getting into the authorities that we don't truly know about. The Witch of Pride, Typhon, used her authority to sense if someone was good or bad by touching them, as well as determining how guilty they felt. She can shatter the bodies of those who feel guilt and whom she perceives as sinners. Since there have been no other uses of the authority of Pride on screen, that's the most we know about, though this is likely only a fraction of her actual power. For Envy, we have Satella. However, we don't actually know anything about this power, but there is some speculation we can do later, so let's just go past this one for now. One of two historical sins, Vainglory, was wielded by Pandora, everyone's favorite for some reason. Her power is described as manipulating phenomena, and is implied to mostly be used defensively. She was seen manipulating reality so that someone never did something in the first place, as well as negating her own death. She can also manipulate people's minds, including memories and senses. Beyond this, we're unsure. A lot of people speculate that she is capable of a lot more, but she clearly isn't, considering that she didn't get what she wanted in Amelia's Arc 4 flashback. There is some limit to her power, we just don't know what it is. The second historical sin, this was wielded by Hector, the Warlock of Melancholy. His power is sort of unclear, but it seems to be related to gravity or spatial manipulation. Roswell felt like the air was crushing him and it became harder to approach Hector, as if the gravity was increasing around him. He could also create a force to crush things from a distance, and that's about all we know. Now, we have three characters that have other authorities, though we don't know how to categorize them because they haven't been officially stated. Natsuki Subaru is an easy ride in here, possessing Return by Death, which allows Subaru to go back to a predetermined save point. Satella, the Witch of Envy that was previously mentioned, generally sets these save points to a time where Subaru can feasibly get out of a situation. and it is speculated that he can set his own checkpoints if Satella has lost sight of him, like in Arc 7, but that is not confirmed. Obviously, with the relation to the Witch of Envy, we're left to speculate that he is the wielder of the Authority of Envy, but that's not all. Aldebaran also has an authority, and it works strikingly similar to Return by Death. He possesses, unironically, a domain expansion. The domain is able to wrap an area in an allegedly translucent space. After the domain, or as he sometimes puts it, the thought experiment is set, something seemingly arbitrarily determines if he is the victim or the aggressor, or to put it another way, the defender or the attacker. When someone dies, things inside the domain are reset to when it was established, depending on that decision. If Aldebaran is the attacker, the aggressor, his target will retain all memories from the previous loop, and can even reset themselves, like with Lip Burial in the side story The Day I Gave Up Being a Following Star. If he is the defender, or the victim, he will retain his memories of the loop, while the target will not. The domain can also be broken by changes in environment, like if the room he is using it in is destroyed, as demonstrated by Capella in Arc 5. Just like Subaru, we're left to speculate that he also has the Authority of Envy, which is weird because it's been established that you can't split authorities like that, but you can assume that they are apostles of envy, something we touched on previously, and Satella's authority is likely somewhat similar to both Subaru and Aldebaran's, hence why she was sealed instead of killed. That's just speculation though. The final authority we will talk about, and big chance you guys have never seen or heard of this guy, is Clind, Roswaal's right-hand man. With the movement of his hand, he essentially removes the space occupied by something from the world entirely, effectively causing it to vanish. The body of someone he attacked was, quote, gouged out, end quote. Their body became, quote, riddled with holes like a moth-eaten piece of cloth, and one after another, the space their body occupied was devoured and disappeared, end quote. There is also seemingly some transaction related to magics with Roswaal that enables Clind to use teleportation exclusively within Lagunica. Now, we don't know technically what his authority is, but we have a good idea. This sounds pretty close to the aforementioned Authority of Melancholy that Hector used, and in the original side story that shows off his authority, Clind literally says the word melancholy while using it. This has since been changed in a more updated version of the story, but, you know, it's still probably correct, and I think we can infer what that means. Now that we're done talking about authorities, divine protections were created to combat those deadly powers, though authorities are ultimately stronger. Similarly, curses from the last video were formed in the idea of the harm authorities cause. Our current understanding of divine protections is that you are born with them, and in the web novel, Roswaal mentions that it's speculated in universe that Ode Laguna passes them out. It should be noted that divine protections are sometimes incorrectly called blessings, but this is not just a bad translation, but also an issue for canon because the nation of Gusteco has a power set known as blessings, but we might have to save that for the third video. Divine protections themselves are pretty rare, but good ones even more so. It is also possible to be born with more than one divine protection, but extremely uncommon. In the side story Battle Ballad, where we also see people lose access to their divine protection when inside the area covered by certain magic circles, allegedly being freed from the constraints of the world. And as the Saint Archbishop of Pride insinuated, these powers were used by the observers up in the heavens as a method of control over the world. More about them in the next video too, probably. Specific races or groups of people have divine protections specific to their group or race that are also passed down through generations, and some divine protections can even be inscribed into items. In exceedingly rare cases, however, only one copy of a divine protection can exist at a time. An example is Melee's divine protection of demon manipulation, which allows her to control witch beasts. There is an upper limit to this, of course, as she cannot control something like the white whale. Only one copy of this DP can exist in the world. The divine protection of the soul of language is wielded by Auto. The DP allows the user to speak with a large number of creatures. The frequency can be tuned to isolate certain voices, and overuse leads to blood leaking out of your face. Most people who have this DP go insane from the voices and end up taking their own lives. The divine protection of earth spirits is wielded by Garfield. So long as his feet are planted on the ground, he is able to regenerate at a rapid pace, as well as manipulate the earth itself. He can pull it up into a wall in front of him, shoot it up into the air as a platform with him on it, cause it to shift around, etc. He's essentially immune to things like earth magic at this point. The divine protection of wind reading is wielded by Krush Karsten. This DP acts as almost a sixth sense for Krush. It not only allows her to read people and tell if they're lying, but helps a lot with wind-based attacks that are normally tricky to deal with. The divine protection of water is wielded by Ferris, and it makes him really good at water magic. Yep, that's it. The divine protection of the sun is wielded by Priscilla, and with it she benefits more from buff-related abilities, and is just straight up stronger during the day. The divine protection of gathering spirits is wielded by Julius. He can see and talk to spirits, meaning he can more easily befriend them, and it also attracts spirits directly to him. The divine protection of trisection is wielded by the Pearl Baton siblings. They are able to share physical and emotional burdens between each other, and can use it to cast a resonance wave, which can be used 3 times a day. Felt also has a divine protection, however, we don't really know what it does or what it's called, we just know that she can utilize wind to some extent. The divine protection of Bedroom Wiles is wielded by this freaky little dude named Camberley, and it's exactly what it sounds like, he's good at fucking. The divine protection of Evaluation was once wielded by Alec Hoshin, and is now wielded by Russell Fellow. It can be used to determine if any item is good or bad quality, and if they are familiar with the item, they can also estimate how much it's worth. The divine protection of the Death God was wielded by the previous Sword Saint Teresia von Estrella, which allowed her to slash wounds in people that could not be healed. These wounds would open depending on her proximity to the target, meaning they could close at a great distance. The divine protection of Telepathy is wielded by Liliana. It allows her to transmit her thoughts to other people without speaking. The divine protection of Wind Evasion is wielded by all Earth Dragons, which can be used to negate the effects of wind resistance on both the dragon itself and whatever cargo they are carrying with a cooldown. The divine protection of Ambushing is wielded by all werewolves, and it just makes them harder to detect. The divine protection of Durability is one of the DPs we spoke about earlier that can be inscribed. It makes it so that armor is a lot more durable as long as the user does not exhaust their mana, and this is something that is embedded in Crucia's armor in fact. The divine protection of Empathy is wielded by some guy. On touch, the user can read the target's feelings, and could make two individuals understand each other if you stood between them. Finally, the divine protection of Morale, wielded by Medium O'Connell, which responds strongly to the user's mood. If they're happy, they become stronger. If they're sad, they become weaker. And that'll be it for divine protections. Reinhard gets his own section because he's him, but also because, as a human, he just works a little bit uniquely compared to other people, plus he's pretty popular for being so powerful. And a lot of people want to know what is so unique about him. And that first thing will be excess mana circulation constitution. Like we touched on in the first video about gates and how they can be broken, Reinhard is actually a victim of this, having a defective gate himself. He is completely unable to use magic, but he can still take in mana to increase his own physical strength and nullify incoming magical attacks almost entirely, preventing him from suffering a blow from magic under normal circumstances. When he begins to take in mana through his gate, it's as if all of the mana around him in the atmosphere turns towards him, making the prospect of somebody else taking in mana to do their own spellcasting an impossible task. He is also capable of draining other people's mana. Although this condition is not unique to Reinhard, it is exceptionally rare. Reinhard also possesses the unique capability of gaining any divine protection he needs. However, this does not inherently mean that he can will a divine protection into existence. He has to request one from Ode Laguna when he feels one is necessary, and it has to not be limited. For example, Reinhard cannot request Melee's divine protection, and that's why we made special note of it being a unique one earlier, as only one copy of that DP can exist at a time. Due to this power, he has an absurd amount of divine protections. Per the ReZero wiki, quote, 80% of all magic attacks from all 6 magic types are dispersed away or neutralized. He gets stronger when he's standing under the blue sky, rainy sky, night sky, and when he's bleeding. He can move at superhuman speeds. Any projectile thrown against him automatically changes its trajectory, making him unable to get hit by any projectiles. He cannot get ambushed, and the first attack will always miss unless he willingly takes it. He will automatically master any weapon he picks up, even if he has never seen or handled it before, and I'm sure many others. Check the wiki page for more. Even if it's not quite like Subaru's, Reinhard has also demonstrated at least some resistance to authorities. He still falls victim to gluttony when it comes to remembering people, but he was able to withstand some of the ping-ponging of emotions coming from serious soul-washing. And finally, the divine protection of the Sword Saint. We left that off of the earlier divine protection list because this is a unique one. This is a divine protection that has been passed down through the Estrella family. It allows the user to draw out their maximum potential in combat, making them a master in every kind of weapon and combat style. It allows them to understand everything about a sword with a glance and know how to use them. It allows them to see any and all flaws in an opponent's fighting style, intuitively know their weakest points, and judge their abilities at just a glance. When using the divine protection, the user will see white lines of sorts that act as guides as to where the user should swing to maximize their offensive and defensive capabilities, those lines being drawn by the Sword God, an entity we don't know much about. Uniquely, the active Sword Saint will also know who their successor is. And those are all the powers that make Reinhard unique, a defective gate with insane mana potential, who can access most divine protections at will, with a divine protection that was designed to make him the strongest swordsman. Pretty insane. And that will be it for this second video about the power system with authorities, divine protections, and Reinhard himself. Make sure you stay tuned for the third video in the near future talking about the legendary swords of power, the multiple techniques of ReZero, as well as the miscellaneous abilities that don't fit under the standard categorization, like blessings, beastification, and the observers. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for the funny YouTube algorithm. You can also become a YouTube member, which gives you access to behind-the-scenes content, a badge on comments and livestream chats, as well as the use of emotes and videos before their actual release. You can also check the description for socials like Twitter, where I'm objectively correct all the time, and Discord, where we talk about ReZero, My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, and stuff like that. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.